Hello and welcome to Sunday Morning with me, Zara Janjua. I'm with you until 10 o'clock. Coming up on the show today, we'll be finding out about a new interactive play tackling the radicalisation of boys and men online and the rise of incel culture. The death of activist and Russian political prisoner Alexei Navalny has sent ripples across the continent. But what causes someone to give their life for a cause, and what role does religion play in such acts of sacrifice? And 2 years on from the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we'll be hearing how the ongoing conflict is affecting Ukrainians both at home and those who have been displaced. First, let's ease into this Sunday morning with some music from Aretha Franklin's album Let Me Into Your Life. Released 50 years ago this very day, here's Until You Come Back to Me. That was Aretha Franklin and Until You Come Back to Me. Now, this weekend marks 2 years since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Since then, as well as thousands of Ukrainians killed, over 6 million have left the country, according to the UN. Amongst them are mother of three, Hannah Tekliuk, who along with her 2 children, fled to Edinburgh in April 2022, leaving the rest of her family, including her older son, behind. She joins me now in the studio this morning. Good morning, Hannah.
Good morning, Zara. Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you with us here. Now, also joining us from Ukraine is Nigel Osborne, former Reed Professor of Music at the University of Edinburgh. And we spoke to Nigel just before Christmas last year about his work in Ukraine using music therapy for those traumatised by war. Good morning to you, Nigel.
Good morning. Nice to hear you. And добрий ранок, Hannah. Дуже
Добрий
приємно.
ранок, дуже приємно.
Lovely to have you with us. Good morning. Hannah, let's start with you. We spoke to you, I think it was a few months after you arrived in Edinburgh or in Scotland in 2022. Can you just remind us about that journey out of Ukraine?
We left Ukraine a week, probably, when the war started. I was panicking a bit. I didn't know what to wait. I wanted to save my children from the war. Unfortunately, I couldn't take my elder son with me, but I took two of my younger children into the car and we traveled to Poland, where we spent 6 weeks. And then we got our visas and we traveled here. And one very kind lady whose name is Janet Gray hosted us for 6 months. And then very kind people from Morningside United Church hosted us now for more than a year in the Men's.
Must have been very difficult for you to leave your older son behind.
It was extremely difficult. I couldn't forget his face when he was saying goodbye to us and his sad eyes. But he was over 18 at the time and he couldn't leave Ukraine.
And what's it been like for you for the last couple of years since you arrived here?
In general, it was really good. We are so thankful to the Scottish people who were so kind to us. I found several jobs which were at first part-time and casual, but then finally a month ago I think I got a permanent full-time job, which I'm really happy about. And I got very many very kind friends, and they are amazing, and their attitude to Ukrainians is always supportive, and they are helping us in any way they can. And I'm so much thankful to everyone who is helping us.
I'm glad to hear that you have had so much support and seen so much kindness since you arrived. The last 2 years, understandably, must have been very difficult watching the footage of what has been happening in Ukraine. And I believe your youngest son has now decided to return to Ukraine and wants to sign up to the army. Tell us a little bit about his mindset and why he feels that way.
I think he's actually very patriotic and he wants to help as much as he can. Though we try to explain to him that even being here, we can help a lot. My daughter and I founded an Edinburgh Spiders camouflage netting group. We are making camouflage nets to cover ambulances, field hospitals, vehicles, and all those people who need protection from aviation, bombing or shelling. And we are making nets in Edinburgh at 4 locations.
That's fantastic.
We are also collecting food and clothes and bedding to send to Ukraine. And I also found, my friends and I founded the Ukrainian St. Margaret's Saturday School because we wanted the Ukrainian children to find a good community.
Yes.
And to be connected with their heritage. Though we are also teaching English to them because we think that they have to be integrated into the society here and they have to be useful and thrive.
It's incredible what you have managed to achieve just from being based here. Understandably, though, you must be concerned about your son returning to the Ukraine, particularly to fight.
Yeah, so though we were trying to explain to him that, look, here we are also helping people and we are connected with Ukraine because we are helping the people who are there. But he was very persistent. He wanted to help more. Probably it wasn't enough for him.
Yeah. Nigel, let's bring you in here. You've been obviously travelling back and forth between Scotland and Ukraine for a while now. Tell us about your work. What do you do and who you're working with?
Yes, well, we use creative arts to help people who are having difficulties because of the war, ranging from children to soldiers. So we're working in hospitals, children's shelters, and also part of a team training young students in the work, how to lead this work and how to do it. It's a new movement, really. There have been examples of it in the past, but I think in Ukraine it's taking on a new character, the use of creative arts to help people. People seem to be very ready and want that kind of support to help them through the mental difficulties of dealing with the war.
You mentioned the mental difficulties there. How do you think the children in particular that you meet at the moment are dealing with what's going on?
They're extraordinarily resilient. The advantage that Ukrainian children have is they have a reasonably unified society. They have social support. The idea that we're going to resist this and be resilient and keep going is in society as a whole, and it communicates to the children. On the other hand, the pressures on them are enormous. And imagine coming from the pandemic into a war. That's the trajectory of Ukrainian children. And so they need a lot of help and support. But they respond well to it. So that's the optimistic news, is that we've seen big improvements in the children that we work with.
Nigel, Hannah obviously mentioned some efforts she's been making here to help the children with education. How important at the moment is education for, children in Ukraine? Surely that must have kind of fallen down the list in terms of importance, or is it something that is more prevalent? There's real effort being made to try and educate children during this time?
No, you're dealing in Ukraine with a very forward-thinking society. People are very aware of the importance of education, very keen. We've had open arms wherever we've gone, and indeed we've been invited to many places to work. So there is definitely a support for education. The problems that they face are, of course, resources. A lot of teachers being called up, men. And financial resources, and also the problem that a lot of children have to be online. Some authorities consider it too dangerous for people to be together in school. So if I work in Kharkiv Oblast area, there most of the children are online. In Lviv, most of them are in school. It depends on the area and the degree of danger, but that's a big problem for children. And really, you can't do life online.
I'm wondering about mental health at the moment for people in Ukraine and those who've been displaced. And I'd like to ask you, Nigel, about some of the soldiers that you've been working with, the ones who have been fighting. What are they feeling at the moment? What's their mental state?
Yeah, I would say that the soldiers are resilient and highly committed to the cause and to their country. I would say that in society as a whole, there's been a downturn in optimism. There's not been a downturn in resilience, but in the last month in optimism. And I think that is caused by two things. I think there's a natural flow in crises. The International Review of Psychiatry says there's a kind of timeline where you get at the beginning a heroic and honeymoon phase in dealing with a crisis, and then comes the disillusionment. And I'm afraid that's where Ukraine is now, the population. But it's not lost its courage or resilience. It's feeling also very betrayed. They've been drip-fed by the West in fighting World War III, and now the drip feed is being cut off. So that's very depressing for people.
Yes, of course, because resilience and receiving that help at the moment has been certainly a challenge politically. So I do understand. And one of the words you mentioned there was resilience. And I hear this word being used a lot when we talk about Ukraine and particularly Ukrainians. Hannah, you went back to Ukraine. Was it last year, the beginning of last year you went back?
Yes, that's right. I visited my family back there.
And what was that like?
It was sad in a way because I feel so sorry for them. They have to live in the war zone where they have air raid sirens every single day. And they have some news that there some missiles are flying. No one knows where they are flying, what they are going to hit. So people are concerned about every single minute when they have air raid sirens. and children who are at schools and people who are working, they all have to go to the basements or shelters to wait until the air raid siren is cancelled. And they can spend hours there. So the education process is interrupted. Children are distracted from the lessons, and everyone, when they start studying or working, is praying not to have an air raid siren at that time. Yeah, but people, they are still optimistic and they are hopeful. They hope for the best. They hope that they will not be left on their own, that we will get more weapons and more support from the world, because evil has to be stopped. When the human rights and the international law are violated, we think that this is not what's going to happen, and the world will help us.
It must have been quite shocking for you, Hannah, to go back and see that transformation of the country you love, the country that you know as home, into a war zone. That transformation, did you recognise it? Did you recognise the people in terms of that resilience, or the people as you knew them to be?
I think so, yes. I think that people are different, and we will never be the same. We are thinking about the war every single second. We cannot forget about it. And there are so many people who were fighting and who went back. They are injured, they lost their arms or legs. And you can see so many military men in the streets. People are worried about their future. They don't know what to wait. Their biggest fear is that we will be under occupation, we will lose our independence, and this authoritarian system will win over the democratic system.
Nigel, you're obviously joining us from Kiev, but have you travelled across the country? What's it like in everyday life?
Yes, I've travelled all across the country. Yes, it is. Everyday life is difficult because, on the one hand, you can have times where you don't think you're in a war zone. Sometimes there'll be cars on the street, there'll be people in cafes, and somehow you're lulled into a sense of security and normal life. And then comes the siren, and everything changes. And then come the sounds of explosions, and you know where you are. So people have to live with this slightly schizophrenic life, and because of their resilience and courage, they do go about normal life and try to live as normally as possible. But then comes the shadow over everything. So it's difficult moving between those modalities as a human being.
Hannah's obviously joining us from Edinburgh here in the studio this morning. Is it hard for you to get a clear sense of what's going on when you're based here? How do your friends and relatives cope back in Ukraine on a day-to-day?
Actually, all the Ukrainians are following the news, and they are scrolling their news feed all the time. That's what I noticed wherever they are. I remember we went to the theater with my friends, and there was a bombing in Kharkiv, and some of them are from Kharkiv, so they were not listening to the play. They were scrolling the news, and they were trying to understand if their relatives are okay, if they were not hurt. So here we feel like we are very connected because we speak to our relatives online. We have some FaceTime. We ask them how they feel and how they are. But we are worried a lot about people.
I know it's been very difficult, Hannah, to talk about this situation in particular, when you have families still out there. But thank you so much for joining us this morning. That was Hannah Tecliuk and Nigel Osborne. Thank you so much for being here. We do wish you the very best in what is a very difficult time, 2 years on from the start of the conflict in Ukraine.
And for love's sake, each mistake, you forgave. And soon both of us learned to trust, not run away.
It was no time to play.
We build it up and build it up and build it up, and now it's solid, solid as a rock.
didn't turn away when the sky went gray. Somehow we managed, we had to stick together. You didn't bat an eye when I made you cry. We knew down the line we would make it better.
And for love's sake, each mistake, oh, you forgave. And soon both of us learned to trust, not run away.
There was no time to play.
We build it up
And build it up.
and build it up, and now it's solid. Solid as a rock. And nothing's changed it. The thrill is still hot.
Oh, knock, knock on wood. You understood. Love was so new. We did what we had to.
And with that feeling, we were willing to take a chance. So against all odds, we made a start. We got serious.
That's when time to dust.
We build it up
And build it up.
and build it up, and now it's solid. Solid as a rock. That's what this love is. Oh, that's what we've got. Oh, solid.
Yes, it is.
Solid as a rock. And nothing's changed it.
The thrill is still hot.
Solid, 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 solid.
You're listening to Sunday Morning with me, Zara Janjua, and coming up at 10, both here on BBC Radio Scotland and on BBC One Scotland, is the Sunday Show with Martin Geisler and Fiona Stocker. And Fiona joins me now to tell us what's coming up. Good morning, Fiona.
Good morning. Good to speak to you. Yeah, the Sunday show at 10 o'clock will be speaking to the Education Secretary, Jenny Gilruth, about violence in Scotland's schools. After teachers in Aberdeen said they feared for their safety, some teachers in the city told BBC Scotland they're even afraid to go to work. Elsewhere, of course, councils across Scotland are facing huge budgetary pressures, while some are refusing to raise council tax. Argyll and Bute have announced a 10% increase, but services across Scotland are slashed as local authorities look to save money. I'll be speaking to Dave Moxham from the STUC about the impact that freeze will have. Also, the Glasgow Film Festival gets underway next week, and I'll be exploring the state of the industry just here in Scotland. That's all coming up from 10 o'clock, Sarah.
Oh, lovely. I do love the Glasgow Film Festival.
Yes,
I'm always
brilliant,
a
isn't
fan
it?
of getting along to that. Thank you very much, Fiona.
Excellent, thank you.
Have a good one. Okay, so it's LGBT plus History Month, and in a few minutes we'll be looking at books, films and television that have been part of the queer experience. But first, an iconic song that also featured in the Tales of the City mini-series, which appeared on our screens in 1993. It was based on Armistead Maupin's series of novels of the same name. This is Gloria Gaynor and
Never can say goodbye. No, 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 no. Never can say goodbye. Even though the pain and heartache seem to follow me wherever I go. Though I tried to hide my feelings, they always seem to show. Then you tried to say you're leaving me.
never can say goodbye. Now, February is LGBT plus History Month, a month that's dedicated to the celebration of lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans and non-binary history. And for a lot of people in the queer community, it's through literature, theatre, film and TV that they're able to make sense of their own experiences over the years. But how fundamental are these resources in helping you understand your own sense of self? Well, I'm joined by playwright James Lay and young adult novel reviewer and queer literature archivist Anna Broomfield. Anna, James, lovely to have you with us this morning.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you for joining us. James, I'll come to you first. Growing up in a heterosexual world as a gay person, I imagine that must have been quite difficult at times. Did queer literature, film or television provide any comfort to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was. I definitely was literally like the only gay in my village. I grew up in Fife and lived in a village called Ely and went to, the local school there. And yeah, it was actually through TV that I kind of first came across like gay stories. And then through that, actually literature through that, I think I was trying to think this morning and I think the first gay film I saw was Morris, E.M. Foster's Morris, a Merchant Ivory film, and then became aware of E.M. Foster and his books through that. So, very important and really important to kind of like burst a like very heterosexual bubble with like no other references. So, it was like a total lifeline. I can remember staying up like late at night to kind of get things on BBC Two or Channel 4, like films that would be shown, Derek Jarman films that would be shown and other queer films that would be shown really late at night and recording them off the TV. So
Anna is nodding away here.
Yeah, lots of names that I recognise there.
And is this like your experience when you?
Yeah, I mean, I think me and James, we've met before, and I think there's about 10 years between us. I think I'm about 10 years younger than James. So
slander.
Apologies. So I think I was sort of growing up in a time when there was a bit more representation. I feel like I remember seeing people on soaps like Coronation Street and things like that.
Yeah.
But for me, the things that I really connected with, I think the first one was probably Rent the musical, which I think I was probably watching way too young. But yeah, and things like, for me, it was, I don't know, cheesy things like Glee on the TV and Doctor Who as well. Yeah.
Because I think when we're young, we are painfully aware of our differences, aren't we, when we're
100%.
growing up? And sometimes finding that reflected, we talk about visibility and how important that is, because you almost need to see yourself in someone else to believe. You need to see it to believe it, don't you?
Yeah, 100%. It really, I think it can be quite isolating and, you know, sort of similar to James. I grew up in a small town. It can be quite isolating and quite lonely. So it's really nice to be able to see yourself represented. And I remember that feeling of like, oh, like there's a life that is possible for me that I wasn't seeing around me every day.
James, you mentioned a couple of very important pieces of work that sort of spoke to you when you were growing up. Can you tell us about one in particular that kind of really, that you saw yourself in, that you were able to recognise someone like you and that made you, maybe it changed the way that you saw yourself?
Definitely. Well, it was interesting that you played that song that was used on Tales of the City. And I think when the Tales of the City TV series came out, it wasn't that I recognised myself. It was like I saw that there was a potential for who I could be in the future, you know, and I guess, sadly, I never became Mouse from Tales of the City, but like I would, I think there's like role models there and also just your experience, like your, so that film. Another one is The Buddha of Suburbia. That was like a really big TV show when I was a teenager, and I actually had a straight friend who was like very adventurous, and I used to go and watch that at his house, and that was kind of access to like somebody who like the main character in the book and in the TV show is probably bisexual. They're kind of like experimenting with their sexuality, and that was really massive for me to go, oh wow, that's somebody who's asking similar questions to me and going through like from a totally different experience, from kind of like culturally in every way, and in a big city like London, but I was still able to go, wow, like he's asking those questions and I'm in a village in Scotland and asking the same questions. So
I'm interested, James, because you've had such success as a playwright, and was that driven by a desire to see your own experiences reflected in plays?
Yeah, it absolutely was. And it was particularly like gay history that I wasn't aware of, like Scotland's gay history until I started researching it. That sounds awful. No, like there's lots of really brilliant books about Scotland's gay history. But yeah, when I was writing Love Song to Lavender Menace and this whole world of this bookshop, and I was like, wow, this is on our doorstep and we really need to know about this, celebrate like the people who started this bookshop and all the lives that, that were touched by that and that history. And it was definitely driven by that and driven by a need to kind of understand myself and other people and just kind of, share that. And that is the thing that powers all of my work. I think that's the thing with queer work. I mean, I guess it's the thing with any art form where it's like you're understanding like how human beings tick and everything like that. And I think, with gay people, it's with like gay work and LGBTQ work, it's very much that's the exploration, and it's still the exploration in everything that I'm working on. Yeah.
Anna, what's the importance of representation for young LGBT plus people?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I was saying before, it can be quite a isolating experience, especially if you're not seeing yourself in the world around you. I think we were talking about, representation and seeing yourself. There's this sort of metaphor that representation in literature and TV and film acts as either a mirror or a window. Yeah. And the mirror is that you're seeing yourself reflected back at you, but then also the window allows you an insight into other people's experiences.
And that must be really useful if you're trying to process and sort of figure out your own sexuality.
Yeah, 100%. And, James, you were saying you feel bad that you didn't know about like the LGBT history in Scotland, but up until sort of 2005, we weren't allowed to learn about this in school.
Yeah, that's true. Yes.
And I think it's taken a really long time for us to recover from that and to start learning about that. And, Love Song to Lavender Menace was huge for me because that's how I learned about Lavender Menace. I started volunteering with Lavender Menace Books Archive in, I think, 2022. And now I'm employed with them as a communications assistant. And that's been an incredible resource for me. And there's a lot of students that volunteer as well. And it's just a really amazing space for community and for us all to learn about our history that we never got taught.
Yeah, it's lovely to hear the sort of synergy that's been created just from you diving into and following something that you absolutely love. And that's what you've done as well, James. I wonder, when people talk about being writers, they often look to explore something within themselves, don't they? They're obviously looking to make sense of something. Has writing made you consider or, view your identity differently?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like with some of my work that's probably not like super radio first thing in the morning friendly, like, exploring like sexual expression and everything like that, I think has been really interesting in the work. You kind of let the characters do things that you maybe would be too scared to do yourself. Mm-hmm. And they're your kind of agents in the world. So I think, sometimes it's like, is art imitating life or is life imitating art? And it's definitely a bit of both. And you kind of understand yourself through your work and kind of maybe what you want to do because you're like, oh, that character went off and did that so that I didn't have to actually do that.
Yeah. I mean, Anna, you were mentioning that actually there hasn't been a huge amount of history yet in literature in Scotland. Certainly that is. But have you seen that change? Have you seen the representation or even queer literature in particular? Have you seen that change over the decades?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, when I was a teenager, I don't even think I really realised that it was something that I was missing. But when I look back at the books that I was reading at the time, there wasn't a lot of queer representation, and I went out and found that for myself. And I read a lot of fan fiction when I was a teenager, which is basically fans of books writing their own stories online, and people kind of queering the narrative of books that don't have representation in them. Whereas now there's so much, there's stuff coming out all the time. I sent an email to my colleagues at Lavender Menace the other week with like a list of like 10 books that are coming out in the next like few months, you know, on LGBT history and on our lives, which is amazing to see.
There is just so much, isn't there, out there if you're looking for it, and you know, if you've got people like James out there creating it as well. It's been so lovely to hear from you both. That's Anna and James. Thank you so much for joining us to share your experiences. And you know, if you haven't seen it, I would recommend All of Us Strangers, which is showing in cinemas now. Now some music from the Pet Shop Boys. This is
Sometimes you're better off dead. There's a gun in your hand and it's pointing at your head. You think you're mad, too unstable, kicking in chairs and knocking down tables in a restaurant in a West End town. Call the police, there's a madman around, running down underground to a dive bar in a West End town. In a West End town, a dead end world, with the East End boys and West End girls. In a West End town, a dead end world, with the East End boys and West End girls. West End girls. Too many shadows, whispering voices, faces on posters,
You're listening to Sunday Morning with me, Sarah Janjua. Later, I'll be discussing comedy and religion. Perhaps not the most obvious of bedfellows, but do we need to find more funny in faith? That's coming up before 10. But now, when the internet was taking off, there was talk of it being a great leveller or something that would broaden our minds. But what we didn't predict was that it can also split us into echo chambers and at worst provide fertile ground for unchallenged extremist views, whether that be attitudes towards gender, religion or politics. Playwright and director of theatre company Civic Digits, Claire Duffy, has brought a new interactive production to Edinburgh, looking at the radicalisation of boys and men online and the rise of incel culture. It opens with an attack set in Edinburgh carried out by a man. The play is called Many Good Men, and Claire joins me now with one of the lead actors, Sinead Igu. Good morning and welcome to you both.
Hello, good morning.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Lovely to have you both with us. Claire, tell us what inspired you to first write this production?
Well, it was the middle of the pandemic and two things happened. One was that a woman who works with young women, with sex workers, got in touch and said, we're seeing a lot of young women joining the sex industry online and we're finding it really difficult to reach out for them. Could you do a project that would help young women protect themselves online? And after a series of conversations with her and a number of different organisations who work with these type of people, we're like, why are we doing this project for women? It's the perpetrators that we need to reach out to and the understanding that it's okay to hurt women.
Mm-hmm. But that's interesting because for so long, women were told, how the things that they could do, I guess, to protect themselves. But actually, this is flipping it onto the responsibility falling back to
it was
men.
like, actually, we need to think about why men who maybe otherwise would never hurt a woman think it's okay to hurt women who they're paying for sex. Mm-hmm. That's one thing. And then I also read Laura Bates's Men Who Hate Women, which was a complete eye-opener. I hadn't really understood about the manosphere at all before. So that was a big inspiration as well.
I mean, OnlyFans, I guess, platforms have kind of been created in recent years that may have led, I guess, to this rise. You mentioned manosphere there, and, that's possibly a new concept. Mm-hmm. Incels may be something that we haven't heard before. Can you sort of explain the online landscape just a little bit more? What sort of things are people being exposed to?
Well, I suppose the manosphere is made up of a number of different groups, such as incels, who the term stands for involuntary celibate. So people who believe that they are being deliberately kept away from having intimate relationships, primarily with women, because it's very heteronormative. Mm-hmm. There's also men going their own way, pick-up artist culture. So there's a number of different sort of areas that kind of make up the manosphere. But I guess what the manosphere ultimately is an online space where men support sexist, misogynistic views about women.
It's something we've heard a lot of, particularly with the rise of people like Andrew Tate being discussed. And, how do people want to protect? People do want to protect their young boys. They want to make sure that they're equipped and educated. So how does someone get sucked into that subculture?
Oh, well, I think it's barely a subculture. I mean, I think Andrew Tate is incredibly popular amongst lots of young men, and they find him compelling because he has got a lot to say about masculinity. And I think maybe that's part of the issue is that young men are not finding other better, healthier ways of talking about masculinity, and so in the lack of a space to talk about masculinity, there's a radicalization process online that's sort of available to them. So they get sucked in because Andrew Tate's got good things to say. Be brave, be strong, stand up for yourself, look after other people. It's not all wrong, and it's not all a lie. It's just that while you're eating the pasta that is the be strong and be healthy bit, you're also eating the sauce, which is that, and that means you need to hate women bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I understand. And Sinead, let's bring you in here because you're one of the main actors in the performance. Can you explain how the play works in terms of the actors and the audience roles, because it is interactive?
Yes, so it's forum theatre, which is basically theatre that interacts with the audience. We have a character called the Joker, who effectively links the audience with the cast and the actors. So the audience will get to watch the play, which is around, I think, an hour long. And then in the end, we have the Joker who asks the audience for any interventions, which means they can go back to a point in the play in which they can change the narrative or intervene, and they get to jump in the scene and kind of play around with the actors and improvise.
And Claire, why was it important to have that improv?
Because we want, so the story, the shape of the performances that we take the audience on a journey, a downward spiral for a character who starts to investigate the manosphere and incels and ends up doing something catastrophic in their life.
Yes.
And so we want the audience to then have the opportunity to step back in and say, how could I have helped that young person on that journey? So let's go back to the moment where he was talking to his mum. Let's go back to the moment where he threw his dad out, or when he picked up the phone and pretended to be an incel and started making contact with that world. And so the audience then hopefully leave feeling empowered to be able to at least have a conversation or to go and do some more research to think about where they stand in relation to this.
I've always found interactive or immersive experiences like this really pull you into the emotion of the story a lot more. Sinead, can you talk a bit more about your character? Because this is set as football players in Tynecastle Stadium.
Yeah, so my character is Sterling. Sterling plays for the Hartings B Team Academy. He's a striker, and he's somebody who's quite antisocial, very introverted. He grew up in a household that was very disciplined. All he knows is football. From when he was a young age, he was in an academy training every single day. Hasn't got many friends. Hasn't got any interactions with any girls. And he's very, very lonely. And he gets caught up in the shooting and ends up getting an injury with his fellow professional, George. And in that moment, he effectively rebels against his family, his upbringing, his state of mind, and falls prey to this black pill content that he consumes at home, watching all these videos, playing all these video games, and the lack of socialness effectively consumes his mind, and he falls a prey to the inceldom culture. And unfortunately for my character Sterling, he takes the black pill, which is lay down and rot. It means life isn't worth living. There's nothing here for me. Yeah.
And that's one of the choices you give the audience, is whether they take a black pill or is it a blue pill?
So there's 3 pills. There's the blue pill, which allows you to carry on in your dream life of what we would say is reality. The red pill is that you wake up to the fact that the feminists rule the world. Or the black pill is that you'll never, ever have a relationship with a woman.
Oh, goodness.
So... yeah. So the audience don't choose which way that goes. The audience choose some things during the actual show, but it's then at the end when we do the forum theatre interventions that they can say, well, I could maybe stop that character taking the black pill if, and they step in and they try through improvisation to do something different.
Yeah, I think the important thing is with the play, we're not trying to answer any questions. We're just trying to pose suggestions to the audience. So it's like in the play, where could Sterling have done things differently in hindsight to enable him to not fall down this path? It's not as in like there is a right or wrong way to go about things, because I don't think theatre is like that. I think theatre should be quite something that stimulates you to think for yourself away from the performance. So it does leave the question as to what could I do in my day-to-day life to change these cultures and these stereotypes and languages that we use every day, kind of thing.
And Sinead, how has the audience responded, in terms of how they feel that they would change the course of events?
They felt very compassionate. We've been lucky enough to have a really, really good audience on a number of shows. There was one show in which we had like a debate amongst like 4 educators for like 30 minutes. It was amazing. The young people that have seen it as well, they've left thinking, okay, there's certain things that I do in my own life, like with my friends, and languages that I use that aren't great, that perpetuate these stereotypes. And I think for an array of people, they've left the audience thinking, wow, like there's a lot that I can do away from my life, as in like my friends and my family and my immediate circles, to change these stereotypes and connotations that we have regarding like femininity, masculinity, and kind of like just culture.
Claire, I'm wondering, nearly every single young teen out there has access to a screen. And, at the moment we're having discussions about whether they should be allowed to have phones in school or under the age of 16. There's all these algorithms, obviously, that are serving up content and that they have no control over. So what can we do as a society, as individuals and even as tech companies?
Well, I think, like Sinead was just saying there, language is really important. So it's great if we can challenge language that demeans women for being women, but also that kind of language which puts pressure on men to not be like women, because the worst thing that you can do is call a man a woman using that kind of derogatory language, and it puts pressure on men to act tough, which I think there's something we can challenge in our everyday lives. And I think that we need an everyday practice of making space for talking about masculinity. That's in school, in youth groups, but at home, in the family. But in terms of how the internet works, it's a massive ongoing conversation, isn't it, about how to challenge big tech companies to take more responsibility about the content that they publish online. But I think one of the really big things is that we need to find a way of making pornography not available to young children, because it pushes the worst kind of violence and sexist imagery and co-authors young people's sexuality, and it's sort of like it preempts the likelihood that they want to go and look for this kind of content.
Well, I think it's amazing that you wrote this in lockdown, and yet here we are sort of 4 years later, and it's still a big topic, something that of course is affecting us and will continue to be a huge topic that I think we will be discussing for some time. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Claire Duffy and Sinead Igu. There are 2 performances of Many Good Men at the Tynecastle Stadium tomorrow and one on Tuesday. Details can be found on the Civic Digits website. Lots more to come before 10, including what motivates somebody to sacrifice all for a cause. We'll be thinking about the role of angels in religion, but also what they have come to symbolise culturally, and our religion and comedy, Good Bedfellows. The news is up next, and taking us there, a song that's back in the charts after it was released 23 years ago, thanks to the film Saltburn. Here's Sophie Ellis-Bextor with Murder on the Dance Floor.
You better not kill the groove. Hey, it's murder on the dance floor. But you better not steal the moves. DJ, gonna burn this goddamn house right down. Oh, I know. There may be others. And so. You'll just have to pray. You better not kill the groove. Hey, it's murder on the dance floor. But you better not steal the moves. DJ, gonna turn this house around somehow. Murder on the dance floor. But you better not kill the groove. Hey, it's murder on the dance floor. But you better not steal the moves. DJ, gonna burn this goddamn house right down.
Actress Hilary Swank plays a woman who may or may not be a modern day angel. But what role do angels play in religious thinking? And what's so funny about faith? We'll be looking at whether comedy and religion are compatible. Helping me pore over these interesting topics this morning are my trusted panel of guests, Martin Palmer, Alison Phipps and Osama Saeed Butta. Good morning and welcome to you all.
Morning.
Good morning.
Hello.
Good morning, Sarah.
Hello, welcome to have you. Lovely to have you. Lots for us to explore and discuss, but let's kick off with some music.
Everybody's got a thing, but some don't know how to handle it. Always reaching out in vain, just taking the things not worth having. But don't you worry about a thing. Don't you worry about a thing, baby. 'Cause I'll be standing on the side when you check it out. Say your style of life's a drag and that you must go other places. Just don't you feel too bad when you get fooled by smiling faces. But don't you worry about a thing. Don't you worry about a thing, baby. 'Cause I'll be standing on the side when you check it out. When you get off your trip, don't you worry about a thing. Don't you worry about a thing.
Now, the death of Alexei Navalny, a Russian opposition leader, anti-corruption activist and political prisoner, has garnered much attention, leading to demonstrations in several countries. To many, he will be considered a martyr, joining the radicals and revolutionaries we've seen demonised and celebrated through the centuries. People who fight for what they believe in, whatever the cost. But what role does faith play in these acts of sacrifice? Well, it's a knotty subject for my panel this morning, and they are Martin Palmer, theologian and international specialist on all major faiths and religions, traditions and cultures; Alison Phipps, a member of the Iona community and UNESCO chair in refugee integration through languages and the arts at the University of Glasgow; and Sama Saeed Butta, who works in the communications industry in the third sector and is a practicing Muslim. Good morning and welcome to you all.
Good morning.
Hello.
Morning.
Martin, Alexei Navalny was a militant atheist, would you say, maybe, before he converted to Orthodox Christianity while he was in prison. He was also a vociferous opponent of Vladimir Putin before he found religion. Would his more recently found faith have informed this approach to fighting?
Yes, it would, but in a slightly unusual way, in that one of the distinctive features of Orthodox Christianity is that it differs very seriously from Western Christianity. In Western Christianity, we kind of assume that the spiritual has more authority than the secular. Mm-hmm. And we call this papal imperialism. It goes back to the Middle Ages when the Pope basically said, look, none of you have real power. I have the real power. You can't be rulers unless I bless you and allow you to be a ruler. In Russia, historically, the tradition has been the other way around. It's what's called Caesar papalism. And that is that the state, the ruler, has authority over the church. Now, what is intriguing about his aversion, if you like, his understanding of Christianity, was that he adopted elements from the Western tradition of democracy and of the right for people to speak out and protest, which is fairly unusual within the Orthodox Church. It did happen at times. So, for example, in 1905, when there was the Great March on the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg by the poor and the dispossessed, it was led by clergy who were then shot down by the military. But that was very unusual. What he's done here, what he did here, sadly, to use the past tense, is that he held Putin to the standard of an Orthodox ruler and said, this is not right, this is not Christian. And he fused that with the sort of Western democracy. And very interestingly, I think just yesterday, his widow actually accused Putin of being Satan. And that takes us to the heart of an awful lot of martyrdom. A lot of martyrdom is a feeling that you're not just contesting with earthly powers, you are contesting with demonic powers, satanic powers, dark powers. And also there is a strong tradition that he would have been heir to within Orthodoxy, that martyrdom was, as it were, the highest possible achievement of being a Christian. There's a very famous story of Bishop Polycarp, who was a bishop in present-day Eastern Turkey, who around the year 164 AD was arrested and was on his way to Rome to be put into the Colosseum. And he begged people not to interfere, not to try to rescue him, because, as he said, if I'm martyred, I go straight to heaven.
Mm-hmm. Alison, some dedicate all their time and energy to a cause, but the ultimate sacrifice is your life, isn't it? And I'm thinking of the likes of Oscar Romero, the Archbishop of San Salvador, who was gunned down during Mass in 1980.
That's right.
Did someone like him have a very clear perspective of their place in the world?
So I think one of the things that's important to remember with all of these figures that we elevate with these spiritual accolades, if you like, of a martyr, is that they often also had feet of clay. And I remember watching a wonderful documentary about Oscar Romero, who was long in my consciousness, someone growing up in the 1980s, just after he'd been assassinated by one of the death squads whilst celebrating Mass in the cathedral in San Salvador. And really not having understood at all that it was really only in his later life and through his role as Archbishop Europe, that he really came to understand the depth of persecution that people were experiencing and then began to speak out. So much later in his life did he come to a role where he felt he needed to speak out. And that when you look at his history beforehand, there's not necessarily a lot in there that would point towards this happening, but there came a moment in his life, just as I think we see it in other people, where they are in that place that Martin Luther spoke of, when he nailed his theses to the doors in Wittenberg, when they say, "Here I stand, I can do no other." And I think that phrase of "I can do no other" is getting to the heart of this self of the sense of compulsion or propulsion that you were speaking about earlier, propelled to say, almost like a prophet with a fire in their bones, to say, if I don't speak out, the persecution will get worse. The suffering of these people will be terrible. The path that we are on will go further and further away from what is good and into what is, and the word we use for this, and Martin was using, is evil.
Yeah.
And I think, Oscar Romero is one of our more recent examples of that, but also Martin Luther King would be another who, was gunned down for taking a stance during the civil rights movement. And there are others in, obviously, the 20th and 21st century that we can point to.
I'm thinking about the fact that peace is obviously at the heart of most religions, isn't it? And Osama, I wanted to come to you on this one in particular because, is faith and politics, are they mutually exclusive, or is it possible to, separate them, or do they support each other? What do you think?
Well, faith is all part and parcel of life, and so is politics. So it's a difficult thing to disentangle. And I think back to I used to work at Al Jazeera, and I was there at the beginning of the Arab Spring, and we had a lot of interaction with the young revolutionaries who were on the streets looking for freedom, looking for bread and jobs and opportunity and a different future for the countries. And a lot of that was intertwined with faith on one part, because faith compels you to seek better on this earth. That this earth, in the Islamic tradition, this life is a test. And the test is to believe and to do good deeds, and those good deeds are in the service of trying to. So in the next life, you're looking for paradise, and the challenge in this life is to create paradise-like conditions as much as you can. Although it will never be as good as paradise, but you need to attain that level of peace, of justice, and you have to put struggle into that service, your time, your money, and ultimately look if people are going to gun you down. And I saw many of those young revolutionaries either get rounded up and put in prison and tortured. I know some of them who died. And it's an incredible level. And when you see people like that, and as we've seen with Alexei Navalny this week, it's incredibly inspiring that there's something out there which is bigger than yourself. It's the cause and also how that intertwines with faith. And I think those things are part and parcel of each other.
And it's having something bigger than yourself maybe to focus on. I wanted to ask you, Alison, how do you reconcile your faith with fighting an injustice?
Certainly, as somebody with a strong commitment to non-violence, I don't think I've ever been tested in such a way that I would know whether I was a pacifist or not. But I do think that there is something about the struggle for justice for people that opens us out into something, into some inkling of an understanding, perhaps, of what is meant by the love of God. And just as Osama was speaking there about paradise, I was thinking about the expression, the making of the kingdom of God, or what I often translate that as a commonwealth of love, a belief that we can live better and we can live well together if we have love for our neighbours. But that to do that will mean some degree of sacrifice. And that might be the sacrifice of money, of tithing in the Christian tradition, of giving at least 10% of what you have as money or as food to others. But that tradition is very strong in Islam, of course. But that it might mean following a path you weren't expecting to. And I was thinking about this just in my own context. You know, I was never expecting to end up doing the work I do with the people I do and advocating as strongly as I do on behalf of people seeking asylum and refuge worldwide. You know, there are things in my past where I might say, well, there was an influence here or an influence there. But I more remember a moment where I was sitting with my husband in my room, faced with enormous injustice on behalf of somebody who was essentially a stranger to us. And having that feeling and those words going through my head of, here I stand, I can do no other. You know, and it was really like a crossroads of, I could ignore this. I could perhaps have an easy life. But would I be able to live with my conscience? Would I be able to reconcile that to the faith that I profess in a God of love, in a love of neighbour, in a belief that we can make a better world, and that really, you know, the hands and the ability that God has to work on this earth comes through us? And will I be a servant in that way, or will I turn away and turn towards perhaps ever greater selfishness? And it was quite a moment of decision, and many people never face those moments of decision and do good anyway. But I do think there's something about that sacrificial element that's very different to the kind of, you know, that popular concept of being, you know, like a martyr to your arthritis because you know you won't take any medicine for it. You know, that's a very different understanding.
Let's bring in Martin here, because I want to ask about the last sort of century here in the West. How do we tend to view those religious convictions with regard to social injustice? Just if you can tell us briefly.
Yes, I mean, I think one of the interesting dimensions has been the growth of a sense that Christianity and indeed other faiths, but mostly Christianity, Islam and Judaism, the Abrahamic faiths, lay upon the believer a responsibility, as Alison has put it, as Osman's put it, to actually make a better world here. And that does call for sacrifice. And in fact, going back to orthodoxy here, one of the more challenging comments, and I've worked for over 40 years with all the major religions on environmental actions, and it was the ecumenical patriarch of Constantinople, the first amongst equal of all the Orthodox patriarchs, who put it very starkly in 1989. He said, if it takes sacrifice by human beings for the rest of life to thrive, we must give up some of the pleasures, some of the joys, some of the expectations we have in order that other species can live. Now, that's a very different notion of sacrifice from the usual one of, you know, here's an opponent, here's an evil man or woman or structure we must oppose. And in a sense, it picks up on Alison's point about actually sometimes you're just called to make sacrifices, to not be a martyr, because the word martyr, I think, is a very unfortunate one. It kind of summons up images of kind of helpless victims who can't do anything else. But this is about actually recognizing that each of us can make a sacrifice, as Alison has very beautifully described. And the Orthodox tradition assumes that every believer is capable of giving up things in order that others can flourish.
Yeah, I'm thinking often at the moment of the story Osama in Pakistan at the moment, which is a very big one, and it's with Imran Khan. It has very polarised opinions. Pakistani politics in particular at the moment has been very polarising. You know, it can be very subjective, can't it? One person's freedom fighter is another's terrorist. And, you know, we've seen that often, not just with Imran Khan, but, you know, Mandela, who Alison mentioned before.
Yeah, and many of his supporters are on the streets, you know, putting life and limb out there in pursuit of that, in the face of a lot of repression. I mean, having worked with a number of politicians, I mean, this can be really complicated because, you know, there can be a sense of purity around, and in the Islamic tradition, it's interesting how it often gets translated as martyr. But in Arabic is the word shaheed, which is to witness. So you've witnessed the truth of this life, and you've witnessed the truth of the afterlife, and you've come to a result. And oftentimes that can be active, but also it can be passive. And you know, we're seeing that in Gaza at the moment, for example, where I was talking to one imam in London, and he said that he's finding there's several people coming in every single day for the last number of months and converting to Islam. And the reason they're doing that is they're seeing what the Gazans have been through and the destruction that they've faced and the lives that they've lost, and the strength that they're showing in their conviction and faith. It's given people inspiration that actually there's something here and I want to know more about that. But that often gets much more muddied with politicians because, maintaining that purity of intention is difficult when there's ego in the way. And I'm not saying anything about Imran Khan either way, but his struggle is also, once you're at that level, is keeping the cause front and centre as opposed to yourself. And it's always fascinating how politicians get that balance.
Well, around the world right now, we have many examples of people whose faiths perhaps are motivating them politically. It's been so wonderful to speak to you all about this. Thank you very much for now. That's Alison, Martin and Osama. And in a minute, we'll be turning our attention to more celestial matters as we discuss angels. But first... Now, what do you think of when I mention angels? A cherub painted on a chapel wall, maybe? The angel Gabriel wearing a wonky set of wings at a nativity service? Or perhaps the guardian angel that leads the plot of the Christmas classic, It's a Wonderful Life? Well, a new film starring Hilary Swank called Ordinary Angels sees a woman set out to help a critically ill girl she doesn't know. It's an example of the everyday use of angel that's come to mean a selfless hero. But are they more than just a metaphor? What exactly is the place of angels in religion and what do they serve? Still with me, Martin Palmer, international specialist on all major faiths and religious traditions and cultures. Alison Phipps, Professor of Languages and Intercultural Studies at the University of Glasgow. And Osama Saeed Bouta, an Islamic thinker. Martin, angels, they're generally thought of as sort of otherworldly creatures, but where do angels first make an appearance in faiths, and how do they come into Abrahamic faiths in particular?
Well, through what is now probably one of the smallest religions in the world, with less than 250,000 believers, and that's Zoroastrianism. And that's a clue to their complex nature, because Zoroastrianism was the religion of Persia, founded on the teachings of Zoroaster, and was very powerful basically from around about 800 BC through to around about 1000 AD. And its core is that there is a cosmic struggle between good and evil, and that frankly, good is having a bit of a rough time at the moment. Evil is tending to be in the dominance. It needs to be opposed. It needs to be opposed by every force that the divine God, the God of good, can bring against this. And part of that is to have a host of angels. And remember that word host. Host is a war title. So the angels that were in Zoroastrianism were warrior ones that fought alongside humanity for God. And they were encountered by Judaism when the exile took place in Jerusalem in the 6th century BC. And they fused with a sense within Judaism as Jewish belief became more and more monolithic rather than henotheistic, which means, our God is our God, but there are lots of others. God became more and more remote. So how did you communicate with this more and more remote God who tended to strike you dead if you disagreed with him? Well, that's where angels came in, because the word angel reflects also the Hebrew word meaning a messenger.
Yes.
So you have this shift you have this fusion between a sense that God speaks to us through messengers, but also that there is a cosmic battle and the angels are on our side as long as we're on God's side.
Gosh, I find this fascinating. Alison, what do you think about when you hear the word angels? What does it remind you of, or what does your faith tell you about what angels are?
Yeah, so very much following on from what Martin said, for me, very much messengers of love and mediators of love, but bringing a message of love, of support, of news, of change often. And I was just thinking that, there are the figures of the prophets who are these figures often quite unusual, sometimes strange, sometimes dressed in weird clothes, really telling God's people to change. And then there are these very differently, but also often strangely attired figures that we have in our imagination of angels, as you were saying before, with the wonky halo, who are there with a message of change and comfort, who are telling people something's going to happen, but in a way that is full of love. And my former curate, Simon Bailey, in my church when I was growing up, who was a priest with AIDS, said of angels, they are there for love. They are messengers of love.
Oh, that's nice.
Which I think is a really beautiful way of describing that sense of a comfort coming through the news that angels mediate.
Osama, what does Islam tell us about angels?
Well, I actually found this Netflix film quite a sad concept. I mean, the story's lovely, of course, but the idea that it's angels that look out for other people or humans is sad, and I think goes against actually human nature. I think it's human nature, and the reason that we've achieved the level of civilization we have is our ability to look after each other and show real compassion. That's normal humanity for me, and the abnormality is the war and destruction that we see around the world. I mean, angels within the Islamic faith, it's a core belief. It's, in fact, out of the articles of faith, it's second after God.
Yeah.
So it's God, the angels, then the books and messengers, and the day of judgment, and the divine destiny, the good and the bad thereof. So they're incredibly important. We know, I mean, what we're taught is that they're made of light. And it's a hard concept to understand. But as much as they have that kind of nobility, when Adam was created in the kingdom of heaven, the angels were told to prostrate towards him. And that's incredibly significant, because much as angels have that purity, they were created just to worship God and carry out his orders and do his bidding. Whereas humanity and Adam and the sons and daughters of Adam were given free will. And that then made the good that we do, the compassion that we show, the worship that we do, even greater, because we've got the choice whether to do it or not.
Osama, I'm going to stay with you for just a second on this one, because you mentioned that you felt it was quite a sad film, actually, this Ordinary Angels film starring Hilary Swank. Because we do tend to think of angels as purely good, don't we? But I guess it's worth remembering that Satan is a fallen angel.
I mean, the film should be called Ordinary Humans. But in the Islamic tradition, no, Satan's not a fallen angel. He's what's called the jinn. He's another being entirely. But he was elevated. He was in that company at the time, and obviously Muslims believe that was all part of God's plan, so that we'd now get this, as Martin was saying, this good versus evil thing, and what the angels role. So the angels
and a
also,
jinn is a spirit.
Exactly, yeah. So you could call it a spirit. It's otherworldly beings, because there's a lot going on. We have a certain spectrum of sight that we have with our senses and our eyes, but there's a lot going on in the coding, as it were, of the universe that we cannot perceive, but is there. So we have, yes, Satan's whispering in our ears, but we also have angels with us as well, recording our good deeds, recording our bad deeds, also clearing harms from our way and carrying out God's purpose. And within the Islamic tradition, the angels carry out many different functions. Some of it's cosmic, so that thing which science is trying to get to the bottom of, the God particle, like how does this actually all work and how does this come into being?
Yes.
They're the ones making that happen. They've got that spiritual purpose of worshipping and whispering good things in our ears, and also the underpinning of the religious things. They're the guardians at the entry of heaven. They're going to be they're guarding hellfire. They're going to blow the trumpet on the day of judgment. So they've got all these ritual things to do as well.
Well, Martin, the concept that Satan is a fallen angel, it's a belief in some of the religions, is it not?
Yes, it is, and it's. I mean, very much as Sam has said, it's not a biblical tradition, but it has been a tradition in Judaism and Christianity at a folk level that God has this moment, and as I referenced it just now, when God decides to make human beings, having done most of the creation, and the angels are the instruments of carrying out his will. They actually undertake the job of dividing the waters, for example, on the second day, which leads to an enormous crisis, but I won't touch on that now. But there comes a point at which God says, right, I'm going to make human beings now, and the angels go, are you crazy? I mean, are you completely bonkers? You've made this beautiful planet, and you want to bring these idiots in? These seriously? And God gets quite cross, and they get quite cross. And in the end, he just says, it will be. It will be. However, in much of the Jewish and Christian folklore, that's the point at which Satan decides that God's lost the plot, and that therefore he's lost the authority to be in charge of everything. And the fall, if you like, is a seizing of the power that appears to have come because of this vacuum between the good God and the creation of a being that will cause an awful lot of distress and sadness. So it is a very powerful image. And I think one of the interesting things about the Zoroastrian root is this sense that God is struggling And you get that still in the Jewish and Christian, and to some
Yes.
extent, some of the Islamic folklore, that God's struggling and the angels are they're there and they're on his side, but there are those that have fallen. Though I do like Terry Pratchett's version of why Satan fell, which is you've got the angel Gabriel, the angel Raphael, and you've got the angel Barry. And it was Barry who fell.
Everyone loves a good backstory, don't they? Alison, we're talking about angels in the context of this film, and you know, Hilary Swank is obviously an ordinary person. What sort of space do angels occupy culturally for us now?
I mean, in many ways, I think they're a marker in everyday speech when people want to say somebody just went an extra mile, somebody did something good out of their human spirit, but they want to elevate that to being on the side of the angels. And I notice it in my own family. You know, my daughter will often speak of people, who help her out at the supermarket when she's struggling with the kids, and just go, oh, that person was an angel, that person was an angel. And really they're just speaking to what Osama was mentioning there, which is the goodness of ordinary people being prepared to make a small sacrifice, linking back to our previous conversation. But I do think they're useful for thinking also in a more structural level. And the theologian Walter Wink, in his trilogy on the powers, speaks about these cosmologies of powers and principalities, which are full of angels and demons and principalities, and talks to us about thinking, what is the best that we imagine an institution to be? For example, what is the best that we want a church to be, or a university to be, or a government to be, or a country? And then has it moved away from that? Is it falling? Is it becoming overzealous in a commitment to a goal which it's elevated to a level that is beyond attainment? Is it becoming too persecutorial in trying to attain that? And if so, how do we call an institution back? And for me, I think that's quite helpful in thinking about how we engage in protest or advocacy or change. If we do see an institution beginning to fail in its ability to do good, being able to go off the rails, be it because there's a corrupt leader, be it because there are many competing issues and people can't literally see the wood for the trees. So I think angels are maybe helpful as a metaphor there for saying, how do we bring that message back?
Yeah, Martin, does the appeal of angels sort of go beyond structured religion?
Oh, it does very much indeed. And I think, again, I think the reason for this is very simple. So many of the, particularly the Abrahamic faiths, because angels are not a major feature in the other traditions, have made God so remote, so cold, so inaccessible, that we have lost millions of people to formal religion, particularly in the Abrahamic traditions. But there is a craving, there is a sense that there is more. There has to be much more than this. There has to be love at the center of all this, but very little of the official teachings of the faith tends to indicate love. And therefore, angels come back into this incredibly important role. How do you deal with a remote, authoritarian God? How do you have some access to him or her or them? You do it through the angels. And I think the angels are now, for many people, the basis for a belief that there is more to life than this, that there is a call to love, and that they are not alone.
Well, angels certainly do bring people comfort and love. And as we've heard today, through you all, that angels do come in form of humans at times. Thank you all for being with us. Stay with us, and we'll be looking on the bright side of life and exploring the sometimes controversial relationship between faith and comedy. Now,
When I first saw you, I already knew there was something inside of you, something I thought that I would never find. Angel of mine, I look at you, looking at me. Now I know why they say the best things are free. I'm gonna love you, boy, you are so fine.
the perfect gift for that special Cubs fan? Hi, I'm Mary Ellen, and you can find the answer to all your gift needs in the all-new Chicago Cubs official gift catalog. More than 200 unique gift items are available, including an attractive collection of Cubs t-shirts. They're perfect for those summer days in the park. And don't forget the Cubs bedroom collection, including the Cubs bedspread for your youngster. To order your Cubs catalog, send $1, which will be returned with your order, to Cubs Catalog, Department 100M, Wrigley Field, 1060 West Addison Street, Chicago, Illinois, 60613.
It is 9:44 and you're listening to Sunday Morning with me, Zara Janjua. Now, humour can make us cry with laughter. It can be thought-provoking, it can offend us, connect us, and it's an integral part of human interaction. And while religion has served as a punching bag in comedy, we're increasingly seeing comedians sharing their faith too. In the UK, we have TV comedies like Guz Khan's Man Like Mobeen and The Vicar of Dibley touching on faiths. Stand-ups like Larry David, Frank Skinner and David Baddiel have referenced their faith traditions too, with newer voices emerging like Fataha El Khoury and Britain's Got Talent finalist Nabil Abdul Rashid, who's making his way to Edinburgh and Glasgow next week. Here he is performing on that show back in 2020.
My name is Nabil Abdul Rashid, and I am a Muslim, which is something... I'm not gonna lie, that's not the reaction I was expecting. I have to announce that I'm Muslim because people never seem to realize I am until it's too late. Recently, like, it was my birthday, right? So my colleagues found out it was my birthday. One of them was like, yo, fam. I said, why are you talking like that? You're Irish. And he said, took me out. Where did he take me? A bar for a cocktail party. I'm like, bruv, you know I don't drink. He said, yeah. I know you do the Muslim thing, but it's your birthday, rude boy, loosen up.
So, are comedy and religion compatible? Is religion a rich seam for comedy to mine? Well, still with me are Alison Phipps, Martin Palmer and Osama Saeed Bouta. Osama, were you laughing along there to the clip from Nabil Abdul Rashid?
Yeah, it's hard not to. He's quite a character.
He's very enigmatic, isn't he? From a Muslim perspective, there's obviously a lot of great modern comedians who take their faith identity as a starting point for humour. Does it sit well with you?
Yeah, it's a fascinating culture which is emerging, and you mentioned Guz, and there's many other both on this side of the Atlantic and the other side, and the thing to note about this, I mean, I think there have been some fault lines between Islam and Muslims and comedy over the years, and I think that's got to be put down to the fact that this is very much not an art form from the Middle East or the Asian subcontinent. You don't get this kind of idea of stand-up comedy. And certainly with respect to the intersection with politics or faith, I mean, these are very, very difficult subjects. So the fact that you've got this generation of comedians coming up now is just fantastic, because I think it just humanizes everybody at another level, that we're not just objects of fun, but we're actually making fun of ourselves, which is where it should come from. I mean, I think people had this idea that the Muslims can't have a joke and a laugh, but I think we're finding people that are proving that very wrong now.
Yeah, absolutely. And Alison, do you think that it's sort of making religion a bit more accessible? Because I guess it's often seen as being uncomfortably honest or really cruel or mocking. But is religion fair game?
I think religion's fair game. I think there's so much that we do within our religious practices that to others who are outside of those traditions will look comedic and, contain what might even be seen to be comedic gestures. And there's also this thing within religion, isn't there, that we can be terribly po-faced and serious about our beliefs and about the state of the world. And actually, we just need to lighten up a little bit. And comedians of any tradition, I think, can help us with that. So I really see comedians who are, slightly poking fun or mocking us without too much cruelty. And I think that's important, because humour can be extraordinarily cruel and utterly devastating. But where it isn't, then I think that ability to kind of puncture the surface of our overzealous seriousness is important.
It can be a force for good, I'm sure. Martin, because ministers do inject humour sometimes to sermons, don't they? And, the Jewish sense of humour in particular is legendary. Do you think that humour does help get messages across that have a kind of deeper meaning?
Absolutely. If you look at, for example, Sikhism, you have these wonderful stories about Guru Nanak, who goes, for example, to the river Ganges and is seen throwing water in the air. And the devout around him go, "What on earth are you doing?" He said, "I'm watering my fields in the Punjab." And they go, "Don't be silly." And he said, "Well, what are you doing?" "Oh, we're washing away our sins." And this sort of ability to kind of poke at it, or Taoism in China is full of jokes and humor, which are mocking pretensions. And I would slightly disagree with Asamar. I mean, I think the stories of Mullah Nasruddin are wonderful bedrock of humor, of self-mocking. The wonderful story of him turning up at a feast in his old clothes and being turned away from the wedding feast, and then coming back wearing his nice clothes and being let in, and then stuffing food down his sleeves and into his coat. And people are going, "What on earth are you doing?" And he's saying, "Well, it's obvious that it's my clothes that are being invited, not me." So you have this wonderful sense. But also, let's not forget, in Christianity, and Alison said, sort of po-faced, there was a whole period in the history of the church where there was a serious debate about whether Jesus ever laughed. And in fact, the name of the Rose story is this confrontation between the Franciscans, who thought humor was fundamental, and the Dominicans, who thought it was demonic. And right through to the 19th century, the idea that Jesus laughed was seen to be somehow a weakness. Now, I think, with Godspell, for example, we celebrate the clown element too.
I'm wondering if there's, in comedy, we often talk about the kind of punching up and punching down. And, whereas punching up is seen to be, there's certain people that are fair game, and people like politicians, perhaps, and punching down would be perhaps targeting someone for something that they can't help about themselves, whether that be physically or otherwise. Osama, where is the line? Is there a line when it comes to humour and religion?
Yeah, I think the punching up example is a good one, and I think all too often where the fault lines have existed, there's just been an underlying level of nastiness to those incidents where Muslims or the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was presented in really quite disgusting and not nice ways, and unfortunately, there's a tradition of that in Europe as well, where other communities have been targeted, notably the Jewish community in the lead up to the Holocaust. So we see that kind of dehumanization element. So I think generally, rules to stick by are, punch sideways or up rather than down. Actually, be funny. A lot of these cartoons and things haven't been funny in the past, just been locused on stereotypes, and it can be done. And actually, comedians say they can't play around in the Muslim community. It's just not true. I think back a few Ramadans ago, Jason Manford went on Twitter, and it was Twitter back then, and said, this Ramadan thing, I'm not up for the fasting, but I'm totally down for an iftar meal when the fasting finishes. Will anyone have me round? And then he got all these responses saying, yeah, come to ours. And then a couple of hours later, he tweeted a selfie with this family somewhere in Greater Manchester, saying, here I'm having samosas and curry, and it was just a lovely
So
thing.
it's about the kind of tapping into the inclusivity and the points, the connecting points, perhaps more. But
It's where comedy comes from, is that kind of knowledge,
Yeah.
taking the time to get to know people and the subject, and you actually get a richer seam of comedy rather than the outside stereotypes.
I'm wondering about, programmes like The Life of Brian, Alice, and that caused a bit of a stir at the time. Plenty of people saw that as being quite blasphemous. Other people thought it was really clever and that it highlighted behaviours. Where do you sit on that?
And I think, over time you see that change, so that The Life of Brian becomes, something of a cult film now, because it was just so funny and told truths about the experience of religion, but also about, in many ways, the films that many of us grew up with at that time of, Lawrence of Arabia and other type classics. But I think for me, there's something important about the critical challenge that human can bring, even within the context of religion. And there are many commentaries on the stories of Jesus in the Gospels where we take a truism like walk an extra mile and think that's about sacrifice, whereas actually there is an understanding that this was a way that Jesus, as a Palestinian Jew living under Roman occupation, was able to point to the humour of the requirement that anybody who lived under occupation had to carry a pack of an occupying soldier for a mile between markers, but they weren't allowed to carry it any further. And so when Jesus says, well, walk an extra mile, then basically he's talking about turning the tables. He's talking about changing the power dynamic, and that would have been received as very funny at the time by audiences who would have said, so if I walk an extra mile, then I'm the one who's got the joke on the person who's occupying me. And these subtle things, I think, that we miss when we're a long way from those texts or those traditions. And I think The Life of Brian, I watched it again recently, blessed are the cheesemakers. Indeed.
Well, I mean, all of the Monty Python and Holy Grail are being released again this weekend. So, there'll be plenty more for people there to watch. Now, earlier, Martin, you mentioned in Sikhism, you mentioned the story of Guru Nanak and some of the stories there, the humorous stories. But in the tradition of Jewish comedians, there's quite a few. Mel Brooks, Jerry Seinfeld, Joan Rivers. Is there something about the Jewish story that sort of lends itself to being funny?
I think there is, and it comes back to what both Alison and Ozoma have talked about, which is that it needs to come from within. And very often it is, it's getting a kind of kick in first before somebody kicks you. And my favorite story on this is Rabbi Arthur Hertzberg, who was the vice president of the World Jewish Federation. And he was on a television program with Billy Graham. And the interviewer, who was clearly a very evangelical Christian, had sort of not done terribly well in including him, rather worshipping Billy Graham. And it came to the final question, and this woman said, I just want to ask both of you, when Jesus returns, what will you say? And Billy Graham said, I will say, my Lord, my Master, how can I serve you, etc. And Arthur paused, and he went, I will say, is this your first time, or have you been before? Now, that was actually dealing with the fact that his belief had just been dismissed. His culture had been ridiculed, ridiculed by being ignored. And what he did was to put it back in the center of the story. And I think a lot of Jewish humor is about reminding us that they're there. And I see that also with many of the new ethnic communities in our own country, and I see it around the world, that your first defense is to laugh yourself. And I think that's, so on one occasion, I was with Prince Philip for many, many years. And on one occasion, we were at Balmoral. We were walking one of the more country lanes. And we came round a corner rather quickly walking. And the Queen was heading the other way in a Land Rover. And she nearly killed us. And she swerved into a ditch. We jumped into another ditch. We all got out. And then Prince Philip, who had a very strong sense of humour, said, Martin, you're a theologian, aren't you? And I went, yes. I'm wondering what on earth they've got to do with this. And he said, well, if all three of us had died at the same instance, who would have gone through the pearly gates first? And for the first time in my life, I had a good quip. And I said, well, sir, that does rather assume we're all heading the same way.
There is a punchline.
Reaction.
I mean, I do think that, in many ways we were talking earlier about LGBT plus History Month and, how a lot of those texts and, books and films and television can really help you explore identity. And in many ways, I do think that that's potentially what comedy can do for people in terms of connecting them to religion. Now, Nabil Abdul Rashid will be at the Stand Comedy Club in Edinburgh on Tuesday, the 27th, and Stand Comedy Club in Glasgow on Wednesday. Next month, we'll also see comedians flock to the West Coast for the Glasgow Comedy Festival. You can check out the festival website for who's appearing. And many thanks to my guests, Alison Phipps, Martin Palmer, and Osama Saeed Butta. You have all been such great company for me today. Thank you for being with us. Now, next Sunday, Tony Kearney will be in the hot seat, same time, 8 to 10 a.m. Stay tuned for BBC Radio Scotland's Sunday Show, which is up next with Martin Geisler and Fiona Stalker. I'll leave you with a final track released 50 years ago this month, the brilliant David Bowie and Rebel Rebel.